We take a closer look at the first game of Broderick Jones and see where is he at on his schedule as a first-round draft pick. We'll talk about that, the defensive line and the secondary, all here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. So I wanted to get into a few things here. I wanted to start off with talking about Broderick Jones this week. Now, if you wanted the full recap of what I thought, my initial thoughts on the first preseason game, there was a Saturday episode. Go back and click on that, whether you're on YouTube or on your audio apps, Spotify, Apple, all those different apps. So you can get my full thoughts there. We're going to start focusing on different parts of the group now that I've had more time to digest some film. I've also put some clips on my Twitter account at Carter Critiques. So if you want to see some of the things that I thought were cool, go check that out. But I want to focus on Broderick Jones because I felt that he had a very good performance. And after having more time to review the tape, he did have mistakes. There were times I think that he lost a little bit of alignment. His fundamentals weren't that clean, but he looks on schedule to me, because those times where that happened, they were few. They weren't all throughout the game. I thought for most of the game, he looked confident, he looked poised, he looked like he understood what he was doing, and he looked strong and athletic. And I'll get more into that in a bit here. And I'll say this, I think he is on schedule. I'm not going to say ahead of schedule just yet, because I need to see him do that against first team defenders, which he did not get to do because he wasn't with the first team on last Friday. And the Buccaneers were also notably missing several players. But I'll explain why I think that we might be getting ready to see that opportunity very soon. But let's get back to where I think that he was strong. In most of his reps, he was in place. Footwork was solid. Kept his frame, did not look befuddled or confused by anything that was thrown at him. He was patient, attentive, and powerful when he was making plays. There were even times there are times where he still has to figure out his fundamentals and how to lock down every play to be an elite offensive tackle. He's a rookie, still figuring things out. But even when he wasn't executing with all his fundamentals, there were times he was still dominating plays, and I think that goes to show you just why I was talking about how good this guy was in college. He was my top offensive tackle on my draft board before the Steelers even picked him. And I really think it worked out for the Steelers. They got this guy because he can be physically dominant. And there was one play in the third quarter. Again, check out my Twitter account at Carter Critiques if you want to see this clip that I did clip up so you could see it, where there was a run play, and it was kind of like, it looked like a zone run to me. We don't have the all 22 just yet, but I was able to kind of see with just the broadcast angles. But there was a play where he's a reach left step, which means he's going out to his left. He's covering some ground and some space. And when he does this, he engages with a defensive lineman who was coming to try to fill their hole, knocks that person backward. He falls down. Then he goes and gets a linebacker. So effectively, he takes on two defenders and eliminates them both from the play. And it turned out to be like a 10-yard run by the backup running. And again, this wasn't, that wasn't Aaron Donald that he was blocking or Roquan Smith. But it was a good sign that, hey, this is on this play. And he didn't completely lock up a guy with perfect form or technique, but he was still so strong that he knocked these guys over even while still kind of figuring things out. I really think that the pace of the game is not that fast for him. I think that he is seeing things at a good pace. He's able to process, and he's thinking through a lot of things, and it's going over very well for him. I think so. And in fact, I was able to catch up with him when we on the first day of practice since the preseason game, and that was Sunday at St. Vincent College from training camp. Here was Broderick Jones when we got to talk to him. Broderick, what were some of the notes that you had from your coaches after your first preseason game?
Control the controllables really was the main focus. No matter what happens, you may mess up one play. Things may not go your way. Just always continue on to the next play and, continue to be better.
How did you feel? They left you in for a while. You played with almost every team. How did you feel your play kind of lasted throughout all that time?
I actually feel like I played pretty well for the most part. You know, a couple plays I wish I had back, but for the most part, I feel like I performed well.
One thing that I was always wondering was, like, how is he going to do against speed rushers out here? And you went up against Nick Herbig a few times today and looked pretty good in that. How are you improving and dealing with different types of pass rushers?
Speed really never was my issue. You know, I love going against Nick just because that's my roommate. You know, we sit down at the end of the night, watch our little clips. If we go against each other, we always, you know, just talking smack to each other. So, you know, it's a good rivalry between us. Love him to death. I love the way he plays. He plays with passion. So every time I get to go up against him, you know, it's always a good battle.
So Broderick Jones talking about a few things there. One, I don't think he liked that I questioned how he would do against speed rushers, but that was something that I did want to see, because when I look at him, I think that he is very good when as soon as he gets his hands on somebody, they're controlled. But when the times that I think that he has looked the least comfortable is when someone is able to kind of keep their frame from being locked onto him. And that comes from speed rushers like Nick Herbig, which is why I think it's actually really cool that they go up against each other. And in fact, they did go up against each other quite a bit when they did some one-on-ones. The Steelers were back in full pads on Sunday. And in those reps, Broderick Jones won most of them. And I thought that was actually pretty cool on his part to get that test and to pass it. And I think what you're seeing from Broderick Jones is he is able to use his footwork to always stay center balanced, to not be leaning over, which was something I was kind of concerned with, considering how strong he was able to play at Georgia and how aggressive he could be at times. But I really thought one thing from Broderick Jones that just like I've seen all throughout the practices, and I think kind of confirmed it in the game tape, is that he does not look like this game is too fast for him. He does not look like that he's having to process way too many things. I think that right now he is at a good place, and the Steelers are bringing him along well. Now the question will be, when does he start getting real reps with the ones? Now he did get a couple reps with the first team on Sunday, and he has at times in training camp, but none of that was, of course, in the game, and none of that's before extended periods. And to me, that will be the ultimate test. I don't think Dan Moore Jr. looked bad in this preseason game. I think he actually looked quite fine, like the rest of the first team offense did. But we all know, as Pat Meyer said in OTA, they didn't trade up and draft a guy in the first round for him to be sitting on the bench all season long. So if Broderick Jones has to wait at some time this year for Dan Moore Jr., it will simply be because they're going to bring him up later on in the year, but it will not be the full year. I think Broderick Jones is well ahead of things. So the big thing to watch for this week is how many times do you hear about Broderick Jones getting reps with the ones, and then getting ready for that next preseason game against the Bills? How many times does he get the chance to play with the ones, and how often it is? I think that what the plan is probably going to be, there might be multiple series that the first team offense gets, and in this upcoming game compared to Friday's game where they only got one series, you might see 2 or 3, and maybe on that second or third one, that's the one that Broderick Jones will get, and they'll evaluate him there. And if he does well there, then maybe in that third game, you'll see him kind of get the chance to be a full-time starter, or not a full-time starter, but you know what I mean, be running with the ones consistently. And maybe that's when this move happens. And if he doesn't do well at one of those junctures, maybe that's where Dan Moore Jr. holds on to the job at least into week 1, and then we just see how Broderick Jones goes. But right now, he is on schedule. If he continues to excel in practices and then does well with the first team, if he gets that opportunity in a game, then he will be ahead of schedule, because then I would think that he will be on pace to start for week 1 if those things happen. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, he's doing a very good job, and he's on schedule, and that's a good thing for your first-round pick. I want to talk about one of the Steelers' second-round picks in Keeanu Benton, because he also had a good performance, as did, I think, a lot of the defensive line. We'll talk about that in an injury note on the defensive line here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We got a lot more coming your way in just a minute here. But first, I want to talk to you guys about Underdog Fantasy. It's one of the best places that you can get ready for fantasy football because it's August, and that means it's the official start of fantasy football drafting month. You can get championship ready for your home league by trying out their best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do with best ball is one live snake draft. There's no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every single week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July. So don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, keeping you up with the date with the Steelers. Now, let's get to talk about the defensive line a little bit here, because I really think that there was a lot shown by this group. And I also want to remind everyone that was all second and third team defensive lines outside of, I guess, Montrevious Adams counts, but I'll get to my thoughts on that situation in a little bit here. But you didn't see Cam Heyward. You didn't see Larry Ogunjobi, but it looks like we might not see Larry Ogunjobi for a little bit here. He was seen in a walking boot at training camp practice on Sunday, so no official word on what's going on with that. Larry Ogunjobi has dealt with injuries the past few years, notably last year. That's how he even got to the Steelers, was that he didn't pass a physical when he signed his deal with the Bears, and then the Steelers scooped him up, and then he was kind of hurt going into the season. Now it looks like he might be hurt going into this upcoming season. So we'll see. Might not be that big a deal. Mason Cole was in walking boots like multiple times last season and never even missed a start. So just got to take things one step at a time. But the Steelers, feel comfortable enough that Larry Ogunjobi knows what he's doing, that he can sit out. But I also think they might start to feel comfortable enough that they might be able to survive if Keeanu Benton, DeMarvin Leal, Breiden, Fehoko, and Isaiahh Loudermilk are the guys behind Larry Ogunjobi. And all those guys I just mentioned looked good. Also, Isaiahh Loudermilk, apparently his new nickname is just Milk, and the Steelers are enjoying calling him that, because I think that they're liking the way that he's progressing. But let's talk about Keeanu Benton, the rookie, because I thought that he had a very strong night. When I was watching back through his tape, there were a lot of times where I felt that he just looked strong. He was able to get his hands up quick and just drive opponents and bulldoze. And that was with the guy that I saw at Wisconsin that made me intrigued and made me say, the Steelers need to find a way to get him with that early second round pick at 32, because I don't think he'll be around for the second round pick. Turned out he was, and I really think the NFL messed up by letting him fall that far. But Keeanu Benton is a physical force inside. But one thing I wanted to see more from Benton was good use of technique in different situations to beat people. And there were times that he really showed that. There was a tackle for loss that he had, I think it was in the second quarter, I want to say, and it was like early second quarter, I want to say, and he just swam over the center, got into the backfield, no problem, tackle for the loss, boom, put the running back down right away. And then on that fourth down stop that they had with him and Isaiahh Loudermilk, he just collapsed the center into the backfield, just controlling it. So he has shown the ability to kind of be the goon that he's talked about being. And I think that was pretty good. But he's also showing that he's learning technique. Now, it's not the sharpest yet, because he's still got a long way to go. But as far as early tests, I think Keeanu Benton is showing some good things in training camp, and we saw good things in the preseason game. And again, this is step by step. We're not declaring it on any of these guys I've arrived or done all this, but they're passing the tests that they're given right now. And that's a good thing for the Steelers, because if they weren't passing the tests, we'd be talking about that, and people would be worried that they mess up by getting these guys. So far, it doesn't look that way. I also got a chance to catch up with Keeanu Benton after the Steelers practice on Sunday. Here was him at training camp talking with me then.
Keeanu, looked like you made a lot of noise on your first game. How did you feel about your first action in the preseason?
I feel like it was pretty good. Just kind of went out there, showed the coach the fundamentals and what I had to offer. So,
what did the coaches have to say after your first performance? Any notes?
I mean, yeah, it's a lot of notes and a lot of good takeaways that I can improve on. Besides the good plays, there was a lot of stuff that I can improve.
You talked earlier in the offseason about y'all being a goon squad and y'all being more physical. Mm-hmm. How did you feel that your group did in your first chance, you, Isaiahh, as a unit working together to change the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, I think we did a good job getting off the ball, getting in the backfield. And like I said before, it's just more to improve. Game went well. We won, fortunately, but there's always coaching points.
What was Cam like? It's like Larry and like the older guys, as they sat back and watched you during the game. How much were they like critiquing you or talking to you like in between plays?
Yeah, they made sure the standard was the standard. They made sure we was all going out there giving our all and not too much drop off from when those guys in.
What was kind of the notes? Mike Tomlin told us after the game, he was like, we're not going to wear ourselves hands out, pat ourselves on the back. What's been the tone after this preseason game where a lot of guys looked good?
Exactly. Just kind of coming out here today and making days worth it, and not congratulating ourselves on what has happened yesterday. But what was that, 2 days ago? Yesterday. But yeah, making sure we going on and better ourselves every time we come on this field.
So there was Keeanu Benton talking about how he perceived things. I think the mentality of this team is in the right place. Like, they had a good first preseason game, but no one's out there saying, "Woo, yeah, we did that." I think that's a good place. Keeanu Benton, a rookie, I have liked every chance that I've gotten to talk with him. And I'm talking about back when I first talked to him at the Combine. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders, knows what he needs to do, focuses on what he needs to focus on, but he's also ready to be a dog on that field and eat offensive linemen's lunches, which I think that he did a lot of that. And again, I think the Steelers are in a really good place with him. I also thought that DeMarvin Leal had a really good showing. I also thought Breiden Fehoko had a really good showing. And it brings me to this question. I think the Steelers have just been operating with a sense of deference to Montravius Adams because he is listed as the starter, and he was the starter at nose tackle in this game. Granted, again, Cam Heyward, Larry Ogunjobi weren't starting in this game. Hayward sitting out, Ogunjobi dealing with an injury. But I have a hard time, but just based off of what I've seen in practices and on tape just from the first preseason game, I have a hard time justifying Montravius Adams holding on to that starting spot for much longer because Keeanu Benton looked better, as did Breiden Fehoko. And I mean, DeMarvin Leal's not a nose traditionally, but he also looked better. So you might be in a position where maybe you want to move Ogunjobi or Heyward to that middle spot while you put Leal or Loudermilk or any of those other guys at that third spot. But again, I think Fehoko and Benton could be either one of those guys that fill into that spot. Breiden Fehoko, underrated, I think, as far as what he could do for the Steelers this year. He eats double teams like nobody's business. He's extremely physical at the point of attack. Not going to get after the quarterback like some of the other guys, but he's going to stuff the run, and that's what you want in the middle of the defense. I think that he can be have a very good role there. Keeanu Benton, again, passing the tests that we see. I am intrigued to see what the Steelers do with him moving forward, because I do think that he has a chance to maybe earn that starting spot early on in the season, maybe even by week one. The other guy that I think that has really helped out with this situation, with this defensive line looking the way it does, is Isaiahh Loudermilk, because we've talked about this for about a week and a half now, but he has looked good all camp, and he looked good in that preseason game. And it was one thing that Isaiahh Loudermilk, I thought about him when they drafted him and they traded up to get him. A lot of people were like, why did you trade up in the 5th round? You traded next year's 5th round pick for this year's 5th round. What are you doing? And Carl Dunbar, I remember after that draft was like, that guy has a lot of measurements that are similar to Cam Heyward. He's not as strong as him. He's not as talented as him, but you can do something with that frame. And it looks like they're starting to see the results of what they've been doing, because he's getting stronger and he's starting to understand how to use that strength a little bit more. Because there's one thing to get bigger and to get stronger, to put on the muscle, to fill in that frame, but it's also another thing to learn how to use it. And that's one thing that I think that that a lot of defensive linemen, period, struggle with at different points of their careers. Isaiahh Loudermilk, I think that's something that he went through last year, where I think he was able to put on some muscle, but he didn't know how to use it. Now I think he's put on more muscle, but I think he's also more used to how to apply. He's used to how to better apply it against opponents. And that's where Isaiahh Loudermilk is seeing progress. Now, again, we need to keep seeing the progress, because this is just training camp and one preseason game. It won't mean nothing if he's not doing this in the regular season, if he's getting bullied around the field like he has in some games when we've seen him. But as of what we've seen so far, I think that he's taken significant steps to be a better depth player for the Steelers. And that brings me to this point with the Steelers defensive line. They could be ready to rock. And I think that they're in a position where Cam Heyward, who's looking fresh, they're not testing him too much, and he's still that Cam Heyward. Him, if Ogunjobi can get back, but even if he doesn't, I think they have the depth, because again, you got Leal, you got Benton, you got Fehoko, and Loudermilk. That's 4 guys that I am expressing confidence in just from what I've seen, and I think the Steelers can feel confident in to fill in either with Travis Adams and or Larry Ogunjobi spots when we determine or figure out what his injury is. So all that being said, the defensive line is in a good place from what we've been able to see. And I think that that's a very good sign for the Steelers, who want to be a team that controls the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's why we led off with Broderick Jones, and now we're here on the defensive line. But I want to talk about that secondary, because if there's one group that we did not see in that preseason game, it was really the secondary. So we'll get into what we got there. We got a clip from Demonte KZ with him talking to him after practice on Sunday. We'll get to all that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. But first, I want to remind you guys, this episode is sponsored by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America, and football season is about to kick off, and this is why you got to download FanDuel Sportsbook right now, because they're giving you a chance to win all season long with FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, if you bet on a Super Bowl winner future bet, you can get bonus bets every time that team wins in the regular season. So you just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory all regular season and playoffs long. So if you're crazy enough to even pick the Steelers to win the Super Bowl, and some of you have, I've literally seen your tickets doing it. I don't know why you did it, but I understand some of y'all Steelers fanatics totally get it. I'm not putting my money on the Steelers to win the Super Bowl. Maybe win playoff game, but not that far. But even if you did that, you can win things by winning bonus bets as they get throughout the season, because I think their lowest point is 9 wins. So that's 9 bonus bets that you'll get here. And you can use those bonus bets on things like spreads, player props, over-unders, and so many more things. So go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue to talk about the Steelers here. We're going to take a step back, and we're not going to talk as much about how this group did in the preseason game, because they didn't play much in the preseason game, and that's the majority of the starters in the secondary. Now, just a reminder, the secondary, the people who did play, it was Levi Wallace, James Pierre, Shannon Sullivan, and then after that it was just basically everyone else is back. Kenny Robinson, Miles Killebrew, guys like that. And there were certain guys that did all right. Trenton Thompson got an interception. Guys hung in there. Levi Wallace, I think, was only in there for a series, maybe 2, back when I was looking at it. But Patrick Peterson held out. He's a veteran. They don't need to see him that early. Joey Porter dealing with an injury, though it looks like I think he's fine. He'll be back soon. He didn't play in that game. Demonte KZ was recovering from an injury. He was back in full practice on Sunday. Tamika Fitzpatrick, they held him out because they don't need to see him at that stage of the preseason. And Keeanu Benton, also dealing with an injury, also was back, but in a more limited fashion from Demonte KZ. But still, it looks like we're finally going to be able to see this group be the group that's going to make a difference for the Steelers in the secondary. And to me, there's so many important parts of how this group will play a huge role in the Steelers' future this year, because last year the Steelers led the NFL in interceptions. This year, I don't know if they're going to lead the NFL in interceptions, but they need to come close, and they've got the personnel, I think, to do it. And I've talked a little bit about this throughout the offseason, but I want to revisit this because I think that this is still a huge point of this team. We've talked a lot about the importance of the offensive line, the defensive line, the new linebackers, the running backs, the wide receivers, Kenny Pickett, all those things. But the secondary is also a very talented group, and that's a group that I think that we could be talking about here with a little bit more. And this week we should get our first real look at what the secondary is like. We haven't even seen this secondary much in training camp because Demonte KZ's been hurt, Keanu Neal's been hurt, Minka Fitzpatrick spent the first week or so with an excused absence from practice. So we haven't even gotten a chance to see these guys in full playing next to each other. And that's kind of a big deal, because not a big deal, but it's kind of an interesting point here to watch, because a huge part of what was supposed to make this secondary really good for the Steelers was the chemistry, because you got Patrick Peterson, KZ, and Minka Fitzpatrick, 3 guys who are veteran presences who can think very well on their feet and are going to be huge in what the Steelers try to do with their concepts as far as how they set things up with Terrell Austin's defense, remember, formerly their DB's coach, who's now their defensive coordinator, and I think one thing that Terrell Austin does very well is he knows how to disguise coverages and get guys to show one thing while really executing another and fooling quarterbacks into making more mistakes. And having the guys to know how to not just do that on paper and not just do the bare bones execution of that, like showing cover 2 and then switching to cover 3. Having the guys that know how to kind of work together to make it look even more believable and to fool for quarterbacks, that is absolutely part of what is needed there. So we caught up with Damontae Kazee a little bit here, and this is a little bit longer of a conversation, and he'll hit a few different points. We'll also have a guest visit by DeMarvin Leal, who's going to come in and just kind of throw Damontae Kazee through a loop here. But here was Damontae Kazee, first day back in full pads and running with the defense after Sunday's practice at St. Vincent College.
Play, design, game plan, how you and Minkah play off each other, who's in the box, who's wherever. We saw some of him up in the slot, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's all about the coach. So the coach is going to give us a call. We know where we got to go with at the end of the day. Keeanu Benton go down. He got to get in with Minkah, so it doesn't, we all different positions. So
just curried up, ready to go, locked in. Little man hitting, little man running, doing these.
Oh my God.
He called you little?
Yeah.
I guess relatively speaking.
It's all right.
What's he like? Now that he's a second-year player, because you saw him as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean he was very good last year. Saw him last week, still getting plays done and stuff. So he's a really good player.
Monte, how effective do you think free safety sets can be this year with you, Keeanu, and Minkah? You guys used it a little last year with you, Rel and Minkah, but now it's you and Keeanu.
Hopefully we use it a lot. Me and Keeanu, we played with each other with 3 safeties before. I played 6 years with him, so we used to playing with each other on the field, and I'm used to playing with Minkah on the field. So it turns out good at the end of the day.
When Patrick Peterson's on the field, does he give you guys an extra veteran presence who can give you more flexibility in your calls, as knowing hey, we can do a little bit more, and you guys ask more of him?
Oh, most definitely. Pat Pete been in the league for a while, so he knows the in and out. He knows route trees, everything. So, having him present, giving us a speech before the games or before practice and stuff is wonderful. So he get us going.
He called you little, but you like playing. You're a good tackler. You like playing in the box. You're not like a deep safety.
I don't see nothing. I don't see the difference between free safety or strong safety. Either way, you got to tackle. So
is that position even change, or that position even more so the line blurred between those two since you've been in the league even in the last 6-7 years?
I really don't care. Just me personally. If I'm in the box, I'm in the box. If I'm in post, I'm in the post. Either way, I played in the box before. I played in the post. I played that corner. Played that nickel. So wherever they want me to play, I got to play my role and play it well.
He plays it role. He plays it well. Some Lil Wayne references there by Damontae Kazee. But I want to I want to highlight that last portion there that he talked about this. And we've mentioned this throughout the offseason, the positionlessness of this potential of this secondary, where guys can line up in all sorts of places and create problems for you, because that is one thing that I think is a key element for the best secondaries, is when you have guys who, yes, they have their roles, but they're able to interchange in their roles, and that helps disguise what their true roles are. It creates so many headaches, because one thing I hearken back to the Steelers of the late 2000s, early 2010s, when they had Ike Taylor, Deshae Townsend, Bryant McFadden, Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark, like that whole crew, right? In 2010-2011 Super Bowl, when they lost to the Packers, there was a clip I remember that I can never find anymore, but I remember seeing a clip like again a year after the game where Aaron Rodgers is telling his players, hey, wherever 43 is, go the other way, because I'm not looking at you if you're by 43. Because, of course, he was respecting Troy Polamalu. And part of it is the Steelers let Troy Polamalu just kind of do whatever he felt like, because he just did that a lot. And that was a huge part of what made their defense elite at the time. I think what's going to be huge for this defense is a little different, because I don't think that Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to be able to do whatever he wants. I think there's going to be a lot more coordination between who does what. But the thing is that guys can line up in all these different spots. Like Patrick Peterson, I don't think he's going to be just living outside at corner. I think he's going to bump into the slot. We've seen it in practice. I think he's going to drop back as a safety, sometimes. I think that there's going to be times where guys line up in certain spots so that you think they're playing one role, but they're really playing another. And that's when it gets really tricky, because then as a quarterback, if you're looking on tape and you're saying, okay, Minkah Fitzpatrick looks like he's lined up to cover deep halves, as is KZ back there. So we're gonna run a play based off of where they go. But then you see Minkah Fitzpatrick drop into a robber role, while maybe Joey Porter Jr. or Levi Wallace is dropping back into a deep third. So now you're sort of playing a guessing game where you thought the middle part of the field was open, because that's normally what you do when you attack cover 2, is attack that middle part of the field in between the safeties. But it's gone now because Minkah Fitzpatrick's there. And so because he's patrolling the middle part of the field. So if even if someone is able to sort of patrol or pick that up and say, okay, they switch to cover 3, oftentimes you attack the seams. You try to fit it in between the middle safety and the sideline corner, so that you can say, okay, let's attack that space right there. But that's also where the robber can often jump those passes. There's a lot of different ways to work this. And that's the thing, is that you have guys like KZ, like Neal, who have a lot of experience playing together, who can work with Minkah Fitzpatrick and work with Patrick Peterson as all really good communicators to find different ways to hide the right moments for quarterbacks to attack this secondary. There's a lot of potential here, and that's the 3 big things that I think that create a lot of potential for this team are the concepts that are getting drawn up by Terrell Austin. I think he'll do a really good job with that. The execution of those concepts being a little bit sharper, because I think that these guys are experienced and they're going to have a really good chemistry. And then finally, the ball skills, which all of them have displayed ball skills at one point or another, except Keanu Benton a little bit less. But DeMonte KZ, we saw ball skills last year. Minkah Fitzpatrick, you got no question about ball skills. Patrick Peterson, that man's probably going to the Hall of Fame for his ball skills. So you got guys like that who play in that factor. And I think we're also starting to see in training camp that Joey Porter Jr., the whole, he only had 1 interception, so he must not be good at catching the ball. That's not necessarily the case, because he's been catching interceptions pretty well in training camp. So you have all those guys, and Levi Wallace, by the way, who also had 4 interceptions last year. There's a lot of potential for those big 3 things, the concepts, the execution, and the ball skills, to all converge and make this a great unit, which again can make this an elite defense, with the defensive front we're excited to talk about, with the defensive line and the edge rushers, and again with a linebacker group that looks like it will be better than it was the past several years. So that's the thing there. The one thing I think the secondary still has to be careful of, and they have to show that they can do this year, they have to limit the big plays, because that was one thing that killed this team at different times last year, was the big plays they let up, like in their losses to the Bills and the Eagles when they were, and the Patriots, and other games as well. But those 3 games right there, where I remember in the early part of the season, that was a big problem that they faced. They got good at stopping that for some years. When Minkah Fitzpatrick joined the team, they have to be better at doing that this year, on top of all these other things where I think there's a lot of positives. But that is one negative from last year, that if they don't stop, it's going to put a dent in this defense and could prevent them from being an elite unit. I think that they'll be able to handle it, and that's why I think the Steelers will be in a good position this year. But we'll get into all of that as we continue to watch things. Again, I think this will be the week we finally get to see the secondary assemble and actually see what they're made of in this next preseason game against the Bills this weekend. We got a lot more to talk about all week long. We got Alan Saunders coming on tomorrow. It's going to be a fun Tuesday episode with him, as the Steelers are off on Monday, so we won't have a Monday practice to talk about, but we'll have plenty to still talk about with that episode, and we'll keep it rolling here all week long, leading you to that next preseason game. Again, thanks for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. You can also check me out on the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. I'll be back Tuesday with Alan Saunders, breaking more things down in your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.